I'll give you 3 guesses where we are. Because here we are, back in the lab again. We like to do the videos back in the lab because we have everything we need back in the lab to mix flowcast, put stuff in flasks. We got hot water, we got pressure pots, we got hand pieces, everything. So what I'd like to do today is we've been getting a lot of questions through the website and emails, and my son Charlie has been fielding questions from flowcast users. And we got some great questions, and there's 4 things that I want to touch on today. The first of those 4 things is stops. We have a lot of questions about, do you use stops? Do you use stops? Do you use stops? Let me give you the history of stops. Earl Pound used stops. He used acrylic stops so that the old hydrocast wouldn't completely squeeze out of the denture in the patient's mouth. It's just like a stop that you would have on the distal extension partial, a tissue stop. Then after about 2-3 days, he would grind out the stops and then would fill that in with hydrocast. Dr. T and I, over the years, we quit using stops in the maxilla, in the upper denture. With the tuberosities and the firm plate of the palatal bone, Dr. T realized we just don't need stops in the upper. Now, if you have a real flabby ridge, particularly in the anterior, maybe a combination syndrome type case, you might want to put some stops in the posterior so that denture won't kick down in the front or up in the front and cause that tissue to be displaced. But that's a specific circumstance. For the average upper denture, I don't place stops. Dr. Turbyfield was using something called Co-Soft stops. It was a weird acrylic that never really got hard. And then, in the last few years that he was teaching, and what I've been doing for years, is we use microseal. Microseal is a material that's a, quote, tissue conditioner, but it doesn't flow. It sets pretty quickly. And so prior to placing the flowcast in a lower denture, I would encourage you to use microseal as your stops. Now, I've got just a duplicate denture that Charlie made for us. We have it in the Lang flasks, already flasked, and then he did the deep relief in that denture. So prior to placing the flowcast, I've done a couple of things. I've lubricated the putty in the Lang flask just with Vaseline, and I'll lubricate the outside of the duplicate denture just with Vaseline and a brush. Then I'm going to take that denture and push it down into the flask. Now, the area in which I'm going to place the stops will be back in the retromolar area and in the anterior, so you get a little tripod, okay? So I've measured out the microseal, and my dental assistant, Kathy, has figured out the mixture of microseal. It used to come with vials and stuff, but now it comes with this little scoop. And what we did is we used the flowcast liquid measurer and 1 scoop of powder. So it's 1 to 1, okay? And I'm going to go ahead and mix this for you, and it goes really fast. I'm not going to put it in a Centrex syringe because it'll make it set too fast. So I'll put my liquid in, I'll mix it up, and as you can see, it gets pretty juicy, as we like to say here in 148 College Street. And if you'll just keep working it a little bit, it'll start to get a little stiffer. And as you can see, the consistency is starting to change already. The nice thing about Microseal is you can also repair flowcast with it. It sticks to flowcast, which is kind of nice. Look at this, the consistency's already started to change. It's starting to get a little bit more like honey. Oh, honey. And now, with it starting to string a little bit, I'll just use my spatula and I'll drop a little bit back there. In the retromolar pad area. You don't have to be real sharp with this because we're going to trim it up. Then I'll put a little bit down here in the anterior. You definitely don't want a border in Microseal. Look at it now. It's really starting to stiffen up. So I'm going to go ahead and close my jig. And this will only take a few minutes to set. You don't have to put it in any warm water. You don't have to do anything like that. I'm just going to sit it over here on the side. And one more time, you can start to see the consistency of Microseal now has really started to set. That's a really good mix that Kathy came up with. It's 1 vial of liquid, and that's the flowcast vial, and 1 scoop of Microseal powder. Okay. While that is setting completely, let's go on to the second thing that I get a lot of questions about, and that's borders. Borders. Now, in the old technique, the old branching technique, you would have stone casts in a jig. And it's kind of like a door hinge jig. And you lubricate that model, you put your old hydrocast in there, and you close it down, and you put it in the wet water, warm water with soap in it. That's an open system. And so the open system doesn't really give you much of a border. The borders kind of drip out all sides of the denture. And so the way Dr. T used to teach it, as well as Dr. Pound, they would take that denture off, and they'd cut the border off all the way around and mix another mix. And then they'd put that border on in the mouth. Well, with the closed system that we use, I would encourage you to try this. Put your flowcast in, close it down, and when you open it and take the denture out, what you're going to notice is you're going to have beautiful borders because it didn't run off everywhere. So what I would recommend you do is don't cut that border off. Go to the mouth with it. Mix the second mix of flowcast, maybe a half a mix. Put it in the Centrex syringe, and then when you go to the operatory and you put it in the patient's mouth, now you have something you can add to it if you want to. But I'm going to be honest with you. The borders that you'll get over the 24-hour period before the 24-hour exam, the 24-hour check or adjustment, your border's already there. It's just a matter of adjusting it at that point. Boy, that saves so much time. Speaking of the 24-hour adjustment, a lot of people are not doing that. And I'm here to tell you, that is one of the most critical steps in this entire technique. Is that 24 hours is the time that you'll make the most adjustments and you'll get the most comfort to a patient. Flowcast actually processes a little faster than the old hydrocast. And so that 24 hours is a critical time. Spend a lot of time that day and make it nice, and you'll be able to streamline your procedure. I'm going to go ahead and open this up, pull it out, and you can see that I've got these stops, but it's kind of gone everywhere. So what I'm going to do is I'll just take a Bart Parker knife and I'll trim it up a little bit. And I'll get rid of most of this excess. Like right here on the lingual, some went towards that lingual border. If I just take a Bart Parker knife and score it, then I can take my finger and just pull it out of there. If you're doing immediate relines for distal extension partials, that one's almost perfect. I'm not so sure I need to adjust that one at all. And then down here in the anterior, I'm just going to take where it went to the border, and we'll get rid of that. I'll tell you, microseal, also you can cut with the hot knife. I'll close it back down. And so now I have my 3 little stops. Okay? Then I can mix up my flowcast, put it into the denture, put a little bit into this after lubricating it, and I can close it down. The instructions for the mixing of the flowcast are in the kit. It's also on the website, the flow-cast.supply website. And one of the things that we get a lot of questions about is how can I make this set a little faster? How can I do this? How can I do that to manipulate flowcast? And so the third thing on my list is temperature and adjustments. Now, what we've realized is dentists are very, shall we say, anal retentive. And they need clear-cut guidelines for things. And what Charlie, my son, who does all of our lab work, he's realized that when we mix flowcast and we put it in the monojet syringe, and then we take this syringe and we put it into warm water, that term warm water was not accurate enough for most people. Warm water really does vary. And people were putting it in water that was really hot. You put flowcast in water that's really hot, it flash sets. It sets on you. You can't get it out of the eccentric syringe. I mean the monojet syringe. So, what we've determined is the temperature for the water, for that initial placement in the monojet syringe, should be between 100 and 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Now let me show you something. This little thermometer comes with the AccuDent impression material, because the AccuDent impression material is a 2-stage. You have a light body and a heavy body. And it's critical to have the temperature of the water that you mix with the AccuDent impression material the right temperature. So I got Kathy to bring me the little thermometer from the AccuDent. We put it in the water. It's right about 105 degrees. That's ideal. Now, if you put your finger in that water, it doesn't feel very hot. But you got to realize, our bodies are 98.6 and this is 105. So it's really more tepid than hot. And so I would encourage you to monitor this. Don't use water that's too hot. I would say warm water. And then once you have it in the flask, now you can put it in your pressure pot. And the pressure pot water is very hot. And it'll get it to go ahead and set to where you can take it into the operatory. So here's what we've got. We got some stops, using them mainly just on the lower. We are not cutting our borders off. We're taking the border straight to the mouth. And we now know how to manipulate the flowcast to get it set in a timely manner and not using too much or too hot water. Lastly, this material, flowcast, I have realized is the perfect material for the branching technique. The branching technique was started by Dr. Pound, taught for years. Dr. Turbyfield taught me how to do it, taught it for years. I worked with Dr. Turbyfield, and he's now not teaching anymore. He's not practicing, not teaching, and he's just not really getting out much anymore. So now, it's going to be up to me to take this to the next level. And what I have found is this material we can use just like we used hydrocast in the old days. We developed it for the branching technique. We didn't develop it for chairside relines and all that kind of stuff. You can use it for that, but I'm going to leave it up to you to figure that out, because I do everything branching. Now, anytime you have a successful product, you're going to get imitators. And we've got some people out there now that have come up with some products and some things that are similar to flowcast. They got catchy names and stuff like that. But I want you to know, I've tried them. I've tried all the alternatives, and even the new stuff I've tried. It's just not good for the branching technique. It just doesn't work with the branching technique. In fact, the newest material, I'm not sure what it's good for. I'm not sure what they're thinking. But I'm not in competition with anybody. But what you need to know, I only endorse one material, and that's flowcast, because I know it works for the branching technique. I don't endorse any other materials, even if you hear that said someplace. So, keep sending us your questions. Keep sending us your feedback. And about once a month, I'm going to throw out one of these videos just to help you guys be really successful for this. And any of you out there that want me to come and talk to your study club, Charlie and I will be more than happy to come spend a day with you, spend a day and a half, and teach your study club the branching technique and the modifications that we've made to modernize the branching technique. All that said, always great to be with you. Come back and see us sometime in the lab.